Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a really foundational text, Jonas F. Soltis's, An Introduction to the Analysis of Educational Concepts. And our goal here, it's not just about what you should think about education. Uh, Soltis really pushes us on how to think about it, with real clarity and precision. Think of it like a primer for sharpening your thinking around these ideas you use all the time, maybe without even realizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Soltis kicks things off by saying philosophy isn't just, a pile of answers or old books. It's an activity. It's something you do. The main goal is to bring clarity, real clarity, to our thoughts. So moving beyond just thought, the finished product, to thinking, which is the active process itself.
He uses this fantastic carpentry analogy, which I think really helps.
Yeah.
He says learning these analytic skills is kind of like learning to use carpentry tools by building a birdhouse. And the key thing is paying equal attention to both. You need the tools, the analytic techniques, but also the finished product, the actual educational ideas. We're going to try and show you some of those tools today.
Exactly. And what's really important to grasp is that philosophical thinking in this specific context Soltis lays out, it isn't about spinning out, grand new philosophies or trying to impose your own personal values. He's very specific. It's about careful and controlled thinking directed at clarifying how we think and what we think about. It's about precision.
Okay, so if philosophy is this activity of thinking clearly, let's try that right away.
Yeah.
Something we all deal with, education.
Yeah.
I mean, if I just asked you now, how would you define it? It seems simple, right? But Doltis points out it's actually much trickier than we think. We're sort of bombarded with different definitions, and we often have this hidden assumption that there's one true definition out there, like looking for the perfect elephant.
Mm-hmm.
Soltis suggests it might be more, center-like, a mix, a blend of different, sometimes even conflicting parts that makes a single neat definition kind of impossible. We have to accept that messiness, that complexity.
Uh-huh. And that immediately brings up the question of, well, how do we define anything well? Soltis leans on Israel Scheffler's 3 types of definitions, which are super helpful here. First up is the stipulative definition. This is basically when an author just says, okay, for this discussion, I'm going to use this word to mean this specific thing. So for example, I might say, right now, when I use education, I mean only the formal school system designed to pass on culture. It's like setting a ground rule for a specific conversation, a temporary convention.
Okay, a temporary agreement. Got it. What's next?
Then you've got the descriptive definition. This one is trying to capture how a word is actually used out in the world. Think of a dictionary definition. Well, Soltis gives the great example of the word run. John runs a race, John runs for office, your stocking runs, the colors in your shirt run, all valid uses, just different contexts. The descriptive definition tries to map all that existing usage.
Right. It describes what is.
Exactly. And the third type is the programmatic definition. Now, this one is different. It tells us how things should be. It often mixes up is and ought without you maybe realizing it. So if someone defines education as the development of mental powers, they're not just describing something. They're implicitly suggesting this is what education ought to focus on, maybe leaving out social skills or physical development. It's got an agenda baked in.
Ah, okay. And that sounds like where the arguments happen. Soltis suggests that the really heated debates about education often come down to these programmatic definitions, right? Not the temporary ones or the dictionary ones.
Precisely. People aren't usually arguing about stipulative definitions. You either accept the temporary rule or you don't. And descriptive definitions are about usage, which you can check. But programmatic ones, they carry these hidden values, these shoulds. That's where people dig their heels in, often without even realizing they're arguing from different fundamental programs.
So these programmatic definitions, they're packed with values, with oughts. How does this connect to someone like R.S. Peters, who Soltis discusses? Does Peters see value as inherent in the concept of education itself?
Yes, exactly. Peters makes the argument that the very concept of education implies something desirable or valued. He compares it to the word reformed. If someone is reformed, it implies a change for the better. For Peters, education inherently involves passing on something worthwhile. Being valuable is sort of built into the meaning of the word education itself.
Okay, that makes sense. But then Soltis throws in a really powerful counterexample, doesn't he? The Nazi Germany example.
He does. He points to German education in the 1930s under Hitler. You can't deny it was education in a sense. It had aims, methods, it successfully transmitted ideas and values, horrifying ones. But the outcomes were obviously highly undesirable. So this shows that we can use the word education in what Soltis calls an objective contextual sense, just describing the process of teaching and learning in a system without automatically implying that the outcome is good or valuable.
Right. So the analysis lets us separate the description of the educational system from a judgment about its worth.
Exactly. It helps us see those hidden value claims, especially in the programmatic definitions, and lets us step back and analyze the meaning of the concept itself neutrally before we jump to judging it.
Okay, so we're seeing how tricky even basic words like education are. If philosophy is this activity of clarifying things, what are the actual, techniques, the moves we make? Soltis starts with something called the prior question, right?
That's right. Sometimes it's called a meta question or a conceptual question. The key thing is, these questions don't ask for facts, like how many students are enrolled, and they don't ask for value judgments, like, is this good education? Instead, they seek clarity about the meaning of the concepts before you even start discussing the substance. What do we actually mean by this term?
Okay, give us an example. Because my first instinct, thinking about education, is to ask, what's the aim of education? That feels like the obvious starting point.
It does. But Soltis, drawing on R.S. Peters again, suggests asking a prior question first. Instead of what is the aim, ask, must an educator have an aim?
Wait, must they? That sounds a bit strange. Of course teachers have aims, don't they? Like wanting kids to learn to read or whatever.
Right, that's the immediate reaction. But the question isn't asking if educators do have aims in practice. They obviously do. It's asking if having an aim is logically necessary, like part of the very definition of being an educator. Is it conceptually essential?
I see the difference. It's about the concept itself.
Exactly. And to explore that, Peters makes another crucial distinction. This one is between aim with a lowercase a and aim with an uppercase a. So lowercase aim is about the immediate concrete purpose. The kindergarten teacher aiming for kids to learn the alphabet today. John Dewey said acting with an aim like this is basically the same as acting intelligently. You need these kinds of specific aims to act purposefully.
Okay, that makes sense. That seems necessary for teaching.
Yeah.
What about the uppercase aim?
Uppercase aim. Well, that refers to the big, broad, often quite vague objectives. Things like education for citizenship or developing moral character or critical thinking. Peters argues these big aims are often too general to really guide day-to-day practice effectively. And, maybe more importantly, they often mask deeper disagreements about how things should actually be done in the classroom.
That's really interesting. Soltis highlights that, doesn't he? That arguments about these grand aims are often underneath really arguments about procedures,
Yeah.
about how we should teach, not necessarily about the ultimate lofty goal everyone says they agree on.
Yes. Think about it. Two people might both say they want education for citizenship, but one thinks that means rote learning of civic facts, and the other thinks it means active debate and community projects. The real clash is in the how, the procedure, not the big aim itself.
I can definitely see that. So making a distinction like aim versus aim isn't just playing with words. It actually helps you pinpoint where the real disagreement is.
Precisely. It cuts through the fog. It's a tool for getting specific and seeing assumptions clearly rather than just talking past each other using these grand, ambiguous terms.
Okay, so we've got prior questions, we've got making distinctions. What other core strategies does Soltis lay out for analyzing concepts?
He details three main ones. The first is called generic type analysis.
Generic type. Okay, what's the goal there?
The goal is to figure out the general or generic characteristics of a concept, basically asking what features does something absolutely have to count as an example of X. The method is comparison. You take clear standard cases, things everyone agrees are examples of X, like history or math as academic disciplines. Then you compare them to clear contrary cases, things that definitely aren't X, maybe like home economics or water skiing when thinking about disciplines. You test different features. Is this feature necessary? Does every discipline have it? Is it sufficient? If something has this feature, does that automatically make it a discipline?
Can you walk us through an example? Maybe is education a discipline? One from the book.
Sure. So someone like John Walton proposed a definition. A discipline is a body of subject matter that is teachable. Sounds plausible at first. But Soltis points out, wait a minute, water skiing is teachable, flower arranging is teachable, universities even give credit for them sometimes. But we wouldn't usually call them academic disciplines in the same way as physics. So Walton's definition fails because it's not specific enough. It doesn't distinguish.
Right, it includes things it shouldn't.
Exactly. So then Soltis brings in Schoen-Schermis, who offers a more complex set of criteria for an intellectual discipline. Things like having an impressive body of time-tested work, using specific conceptualizing techniques, having a link to basic human activities, a tradition, significant achievements. It's a much richer, more specific set of necessary features.
Okay, that makes the concept much clearer. What's the second strategy?
The second is differentiation type analysis. Here, the goal isn't to find the one set of common features, but to clarify a concept by teasing apart its different basic senses or meanings, asking, what are the different fundamental ways this word X is used? The method involves looking at ordinary language. Find examples of how the word is used differently. Group similar uses together. Then, crucially, identify the distinguishing marks, what makes this group of uses different from that group. Soltis uses a simple analogy, trying to figure out animal, vegetable, or mineral. We sort of intuitively group things, then we try to figure out the underlying rules, like does it have nutritive and reproductive capacities? That distinguishes plants.
Right, so how does this apply to an educational concept?
A key example Soltis uses is analyzing subject matter. He takes issue with K.B. Henderson, who apparently viewed subject matter very narrowly as basically just facts or propositions, what Henderson called knowledge that, like knowing that Columbus discovered America in 1492.
Okay, so just factual information.
Pretty much. But Soltis argues, hang on, isn't there more to subject matter than just facts? What about knowing how? Like knowing how to swim or how to ride a bike or even how to do philosophical analysis itself? That's performative knowledge. And what about developing certain propensities, like being curious or critical, or achieving attainments, like learning to appreciate music or art? Soltis argues these are all legitimate things that can be taught and learned, so they should potentially count as subject matter, too.
So differentiation here means recognizing that subject matter isn't just one thing, facts, but can refer to skills, attitudes, appreciations.
Exactly. He even suggests a little formula. S teaches PX so that Y, S is the teacher, P is the pupil, X is the subject matter, which could be facts, skills, propensities, attainments, and Y is the reason for teaching it. This analysis opens up a much broader, more useful understanding of what subject matter can encompass.
That's really helpful. Okay, what's the third strategy?
The third is conditions type analysis. This one focuses on context. The purpose is to identify the necessary and sufficient conditions under which you can correctly say that a concept applies, asking, under what circumstances would it be accurate to say that X is happening or that someone is doing X? The method often starts with an obvious necessary condition. Then you look for counterexamples, situations where that condition is met, but the concept still doesn't apply. This forces you to identify more conditions until you have a set that seems both necessary and sufficient for that context.
Okay, like finding all the ingredients needed for a recipe to work.
Kind of, yeah. The book uses the example of seeing. You need eyes, obviously, that's a necessary condition, but just having eyes isn't enough if you're in total darkness or if there's nothing there, so you add more conditions. You need light, you need a material object in view, and maybe even a discrimination condition. You have to actually notice or pick something out from your visual field to truly say you are seeing it.
Got it. How does Soltis apply this to education?
He uses it to examine what makes an explanation satisfying specifically, psychologically satisfying to the person asking the question. He identifies 3 key conditions. First is the relevant type condition. The explanation has to be the kind of explanation the person was looking for. If a student asks why they failed a test and they're looking for feedback on their study habits, a pedagogical reason, giving them a purely sociological explanation about background factors might be true, but it won't be satisfying because it's not the type they needed in that moment.
Right, it doesn't answer their underlying question.
Exactly. Second is psychological completeness and adequacy. The explanation shouldn't have big logical gaps that the person can't fill in themselves based on what they already know. Like explaining a cracked car radiator by saying water expands when it freezes. That's usually enough because the listener likely knows the car was outside, it was below freezing, etc. But if you leave out crucial steps, it's not complete for them. And part of adequacy is using language they understand, not overly technical jargon.
Makes sense. Avoid confusing them further.
Right. And the third condition is fascinating, the compatibility condition. The explanation has to be consistent with the beliefs the person already holds to be true. Soltis uses the really powerful example of Copernicus suggesting the Earth revolves around the sun. Logically, his arguments might have been sound, but for centuries, people rejected it. Why? Because it radically conflicted with their deeply ingrained belief that the Earth was fixed and everything revolved around it.
So even a logically good explanation might not be satisfying if it clashes too much with someone's existing worldview.
Precisely. For the Copernican view to become psychologically satisfying for most people, their fundamental beliefs about the cosmos had to change first. That compatibility piece is crucial for an explanation to land, psychologically speaking.
Wow. Okay, so we've unpacked these different types of definitions, prior questions, distinctions, and these three big analytic strategies: generic, differentiation, conditions. Let's bring it back. What does all this mean for you listening right now? Whether you're an educator, a student, just someone interested in thinking clearly.
Well, Soltis is pretty clear that analysis like this doesn't give you the final answer about, say, what curriculum is best or what values you should hold. It's not prescriptive in that way. But what it does do, he argues, is give you a much clearer picture of what the choices are. It helps you uncover hidden assumptions, expose fuzzy thinking both in others and in yourself, and it helps you develop sound reasons for the educational choices you do make.
So it sounds like these aren't just abstract philosophical games, they're almost like practical diagnostic tools. Like, if you're a teacher and a student isn't getting something, you could actually use this framework. You could ask, is the explanation I'm giving the right type for their question? Is it psychologically complete for them? Is there maybe a bluff compatibility issue getting in the way? Is the language I'm using clear, or is it too much jargon?
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Understanding this language of education, which Soltis shows is often more technical and assumption-laden than we realize, really does empower you. Whether you're planning lessons, trying to figure out why something isn't working, or evaluating success, it helps you, as Soltis says, make good sense of your own thinking about education.
Okay, let's maybe try to crystallize this with a final thought. We've seen that teaching, learning, education,
Mhm.
they're not just mechanical processes. They're dynamic, intelligent, hopefully flexible activities. So how might consciously applying some of these analytic tools, asking prior questions, making distinctions, checking conditions, how might that reshape your own understanding of your role, with whether you see yourself primarily as a learner or a teacher or maybe just someone trying to navigate the world more clearly?
That really leads to another important question, doesn't it? If getting clarity in our thinking is the goal here, what are some of the unexamined concepts floating around in your own daily life? Concepts maybe about work or relationships or society that might be right for this kind of deep dive using these very same tools Soltis gives us.
Lots to think about there. This has really only been an introduction, scratching the surface of philosophical analysis as Soltis presents it. It's definitely a rewarding field to explore further.